The galaxy was in quiet panic. For weeks, no one had seen the baby dragons from the Great Star Sanctuary. The sanctuary was heavily guarded, filled with top scientists, soldiers, and caretakers who had watched over the dragons for years. But suddenly they vanished. The dragons were not ordinary creatures. They were small now, but their scales could shine like stars, their claws could cut through almost anything, and their fire, though weakened babies, could still burn through thick metals. Many species considered them sacred weapons. Losing them was not just a problem, it was a crisis. Search fleets were sent immediately. Ships flew across planets and moons, scanning every inch of space. Satellites searched cities, forests, and oceans. Even the most remote space routes were checked again and again. Nothing was found. It was as if the dragons had simply disappeared into thin air. Leaders worried and argued. Some accused thieves, some accused rival species, and some whispered dark rumors about humans. After all, humans were clever and unpredictable. But even they could not imagine hiding dragons in a place so small and remote. Far away from the chaos, on a quiet, forgotten moon, a human farmer named Edrin Hale lived alone. His farm was simple. Small fields of green grew under artificial lights, a few animals roamed his yard, and an old barn sat at the edge of his property. The barn was nothing special, just weathered wood and metal sheets, but it had been in his family for generations. Edrin liked it that way. Life was simple, peaceful, and predictable. He did not care about galactic politics or missing dragons. He cared about his plants, his animals, and the quiet stars above. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Edrin noticed something strange. His old barn felt unusually warm. At first, he thought it was the heating system. The generator in the back sometimes ran hot when it was overused. He shrugged and went back to his chores. But as the night deepened, the warmth did not fade. It seemed to pulse, gentle but steady. Curious, Edrin walked slowly toward the barn, his boots making soft crunching sounds on the frozen ground. When he opened the barn door, he froze. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks. Small, soft lights flickered between the stacks of hay. They were golden, faint, and alive. They moved slowly like tiny stars dancing just above the floor. Edrin blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. The lights moved with purpose, shifting from haystack to haystack. Something was inside. Something alive. Edrin stepped closer. His heart beat faster, not from fear but from wonder. There were shapes curled among the hay. Tiny shapes. Smooth and glowing. His mind raced. Could it be animals? He whispered to himself. But no ordinary animal glowed like this. The shapes stirred and opened small eyes, round, bright, and curious. Edrin gasped softly. They were baby dragons. Their scales shimmered in soft gold and silver. Small wings rested on their backs, folded neatly like tiny sails. Their tails twitched slightly, brushing the floor. They made no sound, only small puffs of smoke from tiny nostrils. Their eyes reflected the barn's dim light, curious but not afraid. Edrin had never seen dragons in real life. Not like this, not so close. He felt a strange mixture of awe, fear, and excitement. The dragons did not run. They did not hiss or roar. Instead, they looked at Edrin with trust, or at least with no fear. He crouched slowly, keeping his hands visible. "It's okay," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." A small dragon stirred, stretching its tiny wings, and tilted its head at him. Its glow seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Edrin's chest tightened. He realized how fragile they were. They were not weapons here. They were children, small and helpless, hiding from a world that wanted to control them. He searched his memory. He had not seen any missing dragon alerts, not on news, not on star signals. Somehow, these dragons had traveled from the sanctuary, across space, and landed here. His barn. On his lonely moon. It was impossible. How had they found him? Why did they trust him? Edrin shook his head. Questions would come later. For now, the most important thing was simple. The dragons were alive and they needed help. Edrin went back to his small kitchen and returned with bowls of water and a little food for his animals. He set them carefully near the dragons. One by one they sipped water, some nibbled at the food. Their tiny claws barely touched the ground. They were exhausted. Their scales were dusty and their breathing was uneven. The journey they had made must have been long and tiring. Edrin's heart ached as he watched them. No one else would care for them like this. Here in this quiet barn they were safe. Outside, the stars shone, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. The galaxy searched everywhere, planets, moons, ships, cities, but it had missed the one place no one expected. A simple human farm. Edrin did not know it yet, but this moment would change everything. He was just a farmer, ordinary in every way, but now he held in his hands the most extraordinary creatures in the galaxy. Hours passed. The dragons curled in the hay, falling asleep under the warmth of the barn and Edrin's quiet presence. He stayed near, watching over them through the night. His mind buzzed with thoughts, but his hands were calm. Outside, distant fleets continued their futile searches, unaware that the missing dragons were not lost. They were hidden in plain sight, waiting, trusting, and resting. And for the first time in weeks, the galaxy's most precious beings were safe. Not because of soldiers, not because of technology, not because of laws or power, but because a single human chose to care. Edrin did not know what the future would bring. He only knew that tonight, in the quiet barn, he had become the guardian of dragons, and something in the galaxy had begun to shift quietly, invisibly, toward a new kind of wonder. Morning came slowly over Edrin Hale's small farm. The first rays of the distant sun touched the fields, making the frost sparkle like tiny crystals. Edrin had slept only a few hours, keeping one eye on the barn where the baby dragons rested. He had never been so careful in his life. Even a small mistake could scare them. He did not know what had brought them here or why, but he knew one thing clearly: they needed help, and he was the only one nearby who could give it. He stepped into the barn quietly. The dragons stirred softly, tiny limbs stretching beneath their glowing scales. They made little noises, faint whines and huffs of smoke, but no fire. Their eyes opened, large and round, curious yet cautious. Edrin noticed at once how small they were, smaller than he had imagined from the pictures he had seen in old star records. Their bodies were dusty, covered in bits of hay, and some had small scrapes on their legs and wings. They looked tired, hungry, and afraid, but not of him. Edrin knelt down slowly and looked at each one. One dragon had a small tear in its wing. Another had a faint scratch across its nose. He felt a sharp pang in his chest. These were not weapons here. These were young, helpless creatures, left to survive without care. He could not help thinking about the sanctuary. How had such strong and protected dragons ended up weak and injured? Questions filled his mind, but he pushed them aside. Action was more important. He fetched water and a bowl of soft grain mash. The dragons watched him carefully, their small eyes bright and focused. He placed the food and water near them and stepped back. Slowly, one tiny dragon crept forward. Its claws made soft marks in the hay. It sniffed the food, licked a small piece, and then looked back at Edrin, almost as if asking if it was safe. Another followed, and soon all of them were drinking and nibbling. Their bodies seemed to grow a little stronger with each bite. Edrin smiled softly, relief spreading in his chest. For hours he stayed nearby, watching. He noticed their subtle behaviors, how they curled together for warmth, how they moved carefully to avoid stepping on each other, and how they reacted to sounds outside the barn. When a small bird flew past the window, one dragon twitched its tail but did not panic. They were cautious, not frightened, because they sensed no danger in him. Edrin realized something important. These dragons were not afraid of humans. At least, not of him. They trusted the care and kindness they felt here, even if the rest of the galaxy had been cruel or careless. Meanwhile, far above the farm, the galaxy remained in a state of alarm. Alerts were sent to every sector, every patrol, every listening post. Dragons missing, the messages repeated. Presumed stolen or lost. Extreme caution advised. Alien authorities argued and planned. Some suggested the dragons had been captured for experiments. Others believed they had simply died in a failed attempt to flee. No one considered the simplest solution, that they had hidden somewhere no one had thought to look. Most certainly, no one thought a human farmer could be the one hiding them. Humans were small, fragile, and considered insignificant in galactic politics. They were clever in strange ways, but nothing like the dragon's power. Back in the barn, Edrin worked to make a safe space for the dragons. He cleared a section of hay, making it soft and warm. He made a small water pool, shallow enough for them to sip without risk. He added a few beams to block drafts and gently patched broken sections of the roof. Every movement was careful. He whispered softly to the dragons, not because he expected them to understand words, but because his voice was calm and steady. They seemed to respond, relaxing a little more with every sound of reassurance. As he worked, he thought about the dragons' journey. They had traveled across space, somehow avoiding sensors, patrols, and threats. Their instincts had guided them to a quiet place, far from the chaos. And that place was here, on a lonely human farm where no one would expect them. The thought amazed him. These small creatures had chosen him, not because of power but because of safety. Somehow, in a galaxy full of mighty species, they had known that a human could care in a way no one else could. Edrin felt a strange pride mixed with responsibility. He had not asked for this role. He had not trained for it. He was only a farmer, tending fields and animals, living a quiet life. Yet now he was the guardian of dragons, creatures that could change the course of wars and the fate of entire star systems. And he understood one clear truth: they were not his to control. They were his to protect. And protecting them meant patience, kindness, and careful observation. Hours passed. The dragons drank, ate, and rested. Their breathing became steady. Some fell asleep, curling their tiny tails around each other. Edrin sat quietly in the corner, feeling the weight of the moment. Outside, patrol ships might be scanning planets. Messages could be sent. Leaders might declare failure. But inside this barn no one would touch them. Not yet. Not here. Night fell again and the dragons slept more deeply. The soft glow of their scales filled the barn with light that was gentle and warm. Edrin covered them lightly with blankets of hay, careful not to disturb them. He thought about what would happen next. How long could he keep them hidden? How long before someone came looking? And yet, for the first time, he felt that humans could matter in a new way in the galaxy. Not through strength or weapons or conquest, but through care, compassion, and the courage to do what was right even when no one else could. And so the dragons slept peacefully, their tiny bodies growing stronger in safety. And for Edrin, the quiet farmer who lived on a forgotten moon, life had changed completely. He had no choice but to protect these creatures. The galaxy may have thought humans were fragile, weak, and unimportant. But here, in the warmth of a barn on a small moon, the truth was different. Here, humans could be strong in ways the galaxy had never imagined. Days passed slowly on Edrin Hale's quiet farm. The mornings were cold and the nights were colder, but inside the barn a small warmth grew, not from machines or heaters but from the dragons themselves. Their bodies had grown stronger. Tiny claws that once trembled could now grip the wooden floor. Small wings stretched, almost ready for flight. Their scales glimmered more brightly, reflecting the sun's soft rays and the glow of the lanterns Edrin placed around the barn. Edrin worked tirelessly. He repaired broken beams in the barn, patched holes in the roof, and rearranged hay so the dragons could rest comfortably. Every night, he swept away tracks that might lead hunters or authorities to their hiding place. He even learned to hide the warmth from his generator, covering vents and adjusting the barn doors so sensors could not detect unusual heat. Edrin understood that if anyone discovered the dragons too soon, they would be taken away, or worse. And no one would protect them the way he could. The dragons had begun to trust him completely. They followed his movements with quiet eyes, moving when he moved and resting when he rested. One dragon, the smallest and weakest at first, climbed onto his shoulder as he fed the others, nuzzling him gently. Another curled at his feet, its tail brushing softly against his boots. Edrin whispered to them every day. "You're safe here," he said. "No one will hurt you." And each time he spoke, the dragons seemed to understand. Not with words but with feeling. Their trust was quiet, patient, and profound. Outside the barn, the galaxy continued its search. Patrols scanned planets and moons, tracking energy traces, monitoring signals, and following leads. Most of the authorities assumed the dragons had been stolen or killed. Some accused rival species of secret abductions. None of them imagined the truth, that the dragons were hiding not on a massive planet, nor in a fortress, but on a small human farm, protected by a man who had never left his moon. One evening, a signal flickered in the distance. A patrol from a neighboring star system had detected unusual energy traces near the moon. Edrin sensed it before he could see it. The dragons stirred, their small wings lifting slightly as if they had already noticed the approaching presence. He knew the patrol would come soon. He had only hours, maybe minutes, to prepare. Edrin gathered what he could. He picked up a sturdy hoe, a spade, and a wooden staff. These were no weapons for battle, but he did not need weapons. He needed courage and resolve. As the patrol's small ship landed on the edge of the farm, he stepped forward. The dragons followed him slowly, their bodies low and tense, their eyes glowing faintly. The soldiers stepped out, armored and serious, scanning the barn. "Step aside, human," one called. "We know there are dragons inside. We have orders to take them back." Edrin shook his head. "I cannot do that," he said simply. "They are not yours to take. They are safe here. Please leave them be." The soldiers looked at him, surprised. They had expected fear or surrender. Instead, they found determination in his eyes and calm in his posture. The lead soldier raised a hand. "We cannot let you interfere. Stand aside or we will force our way in." Edrin held the staff firmly. "I will not stand aside," he said. "They are young. They are innocent. You cannot take them from a safe place. His voice was steady, unwavering. For a moment, the patrol hesitated, unsure how to respond to a single human challenging them while dragons stirred behind him. The dragons reacted. But not with fire. Not with attack. Instead, they moved quietly, forming a small circle around Edrin. Their bodies glowed softly, casting light across the frost-covered floor. They lifted tiny wings, brushing the air, creating a shield that shimmered faintly. The soldiers froze. Energy readings spiked, but it was not dangerous. It was protective. The dragons were not choosing to fight. They were choosing to guard the human who had protected them. Edrin's heart pounded. He understood then what had been growing for days, a bond unspoken and unbreakable. These dragons had trusted him completely, and he had done the same. It was not power or weapons that kept them safe. It was care, patience, courage, and love. The soldiers studied them, unsure of how to act. They had never seen dragons behave like this. In all the histories, dragons were fierce, dangerous, untamable. But these dragons were different. They had chosen to trust, and in doing so, they had shown a strength no weapon could match. Minutes passed slowly, tense and silent. Edrin stepped forward slightly, his hands open. "You do not need to take them," he said softly. "They are safe. They are learning. You do not understand what they need. But I do. And I will not let them be harmed." The patrol leader lowered his weapon slowly, glancing at the dragon's protective circle. The glow faded slightly as the dragons relaxed, still shielding Edrin but calm. Finally, the lead soldier spoke. "This is unusual," he said. "Dragons do not behave like this. Perhaps humans are different than we believed." He gestured to his team and the soldiers stepped back. Edrin kept his eyes on them, holding his ground until they returned to their ship. He did not know if they would come back, but for now the barn was safe. The dragons settled again, curling in the hay, their small bodies warm and alive. Edrin crouched near them, brushing hay off a glowing scale. "You did well," he whispered. "You trusted me and I trusted you. That is what matters." One dragon nuzzled his hand, another rested its head on his knee. They had chosen to protect, not fight. And in that choice, Edrin felt a deep pride, not for himself, but for the creatures who had shown a kind of wisdom that even the galaxy had never expected. Night came, cold and silent. The barn glowed softly with the dragon's warmth. Outside, the stars twinkled, unaware of the small miracle on a quiet moon. For the first time, Edrin realized something important. Sometimes strength was not fire, claws, or wings. Sometimes strength was standing firm for what was right even when the world doubted you. And for the dragons, sometimes trust and care were stronger than any weapon in the galaxy. Edrin watched them sleep, their tiny breaths soft and even. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Perhaps more patrols. Perhaps more questions. But tonight, in this barn, a human and dragons had proven something no one had expected. Together they were unbreakable, not because of power but because of trust. The galaxy watched in shock. Images and reports from distant patrols were being broadcast across countless star systems. At first, no one believed what they saw. A human, small and alone on a forgotten moon, stood in front of a barn while baby dragons surrounded him. Their scales glowed softly in the dim light, and yet no fire erupted. No claws struck. They did not attack. They only moved together, forming a protective circle around him. The patrol stared, confused. How could dragons, creatures known for their fury and power, simply stand still and shield a human? Edrin Hale did not move. He held a wooden staff in one hand and kept the other open. His calm eyes met the eyes of the lead patrol commander, and the cameras broadcasting across the galaxy captured every detail. "I am not a threat," he said simply. "They are safe here. They do not need fear. They do not need punishment. And they do not belong to anyone who wishes to control them." His voice was quiet yet firm. There was no pleading in it, no arrogance, only truth. The dragons shifted slightly. Their wings lifted, brushing the air but not to strike. Their tails curled protectively around each other, forming a barrier between Edrin and the patrols. They had fully awakened, but their awakening was not about power or destruction. It was about choice. They had chosen to protect, not to harm. They had chosen to show that strength could be gentle, and that care could be stronger than fear. As the patrols hesitated, the story of the dragon's disappearance began to circulate. Whispers spread. The dragons had fled the sanctuary not because they were weak, but because they had been treated like weapons, not children. Scientists and soldiers had trained them to fight, to obey, to be tools in battles the dragons had no understanding of. They had been powerful, yes, but they had no freedom. And somewhere deep inside, even these young dragons had known that freedom mattered more than power. Edrin spoke again. "They are not weapons," he said. "They are young. They are alive. They feel pain, fear, and joy. They need care, not control. You cannot force them to be what you want them to be. You cannot teach loyalty with fear. You teach loyalty with love, patience, and respect. That is how you raise them. That is how you protect them." His words echoed across the galaxy. Broadcasts from the patrols relayed everything. Other species, watching from distant worlds, had never seen anything like this. Humans were small. Humans were fragile. They had laughed at humans' weapons, their ships, their strategies. They had mocked them for relying on cleverness instead of strength. And yet, here was a human showing courage not through fire or blades, but through calmness, responsibility, and the willingness to stand alone. The dragons stirred again as if understanding his words. One tiny dragon stepped forward, then another, forming a semicircle in front of the patrols. Their glow brightened, not aggressively but firmly, signaling that they would not allow harm to come to the human who had protected them. It was a silent message that spoke louder than any roar or flame could. The patrols looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Orders were meaningless in the face of this quiet unity. Species that had once dismissed humans as weak, insignificant, and laughable began to question themselves. If a single human could inspire loyalty and protection from creatures thought to be uncontrollable, what did that say about humans' true strength? What did it say about the value of care, patience, and moral courage in a galaxy obsessed with power? Across star systems, debates began. Scholars, leaders, and ordinary citizens paused their routines to watch the events unfold. Something fundamental was shifting in the way humans were seen. Edrin did not speak to impress anyone. He spoke because it was true. His calm courage, his refusal to panic, and his careful care for the dragons were enough to create a standoff unlike any the galaxy had witnessed. He had no fleet, no weapons, no political power. Only his humanity and the dragons' trust. That was enough. And it showed the galaxy that humans could matter in ways no one had imagined. Hours passed. The patrol finally lowered their scanning tools. They could not, in good conscience, take the dragons by force. Any aggressive move might provoke the creatures, and no one knew what that could cause. The dragons' loyalty was clear. They would defend the human, yes, but not through violence. Their strength was in unity, in choice, and in restraint. And restraint, it seemed, was more powerful than raw fire. Edrin knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. The dragons settled slightly, resting but still alert. He touched one small head gently. "See," he whispered, "we do not need to fight to protect what matters. Care is stronger than control. Love is stronger than fear. And patience is stronger than force." One patrol member nodded slowly, a subtle but powerful gesture of understanding. Others whispered among themselves. This day would be remembered. The broadcasts continued across the galaxy. Some mocked at first, unsure what to make of it. But soon stories emerged. Humans had always been underestimated, their small size and simple technology a source of ridicule. Yet here was proof that the galaxy had been wrong. Humans were capable of courage, of wisdom, of seeing value where others only saw tools and weapons. They could inspire loyalty, trust, and love in beings far older and stronger than themselves. Night fell over the quiet moon. The barn glowed softly with the dragon's light, and Edrin remained at their side. The patrol ships left, leaving only silent observers in orbit to record and report. Across star systems, viewers continued to watch, learning a lesson they had not expected. Care could protect. Kindness could unite. Humans could matter. And as Edrin watched the dragons sleep peacefully, he felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had stood firm. He had done nothing extraordinary in weapons or strategy, yet what he had done was extraordinary in truth. He had defended life with courage, not fear. He had shown the galaxy that humans, though small and fragile, had a kind of strength that no one had understood, until now. For the dragons, the humans' simple courage had meant everything. For the galaxy, it was a lesson that would echo for generations. Sometimes the smallest and simplest acts could change how entire worlds thought, acted, and felt. And on this quiet moon in a glowing barn, that change had begun. The dragons were safe again. After the events on Edrin Hale's farm were broadcast across the galaxy, authorities and sanctuary officials realized the truth. The dragons were not tools, weapons, or property. They were young creatures with feelings, instincts, and the right to choose who they trusted. New laws were quickly passed. Any species that cared for dragons would need to respect their needs, give them freedom, and treat them as living beings, not soldiers or weapons. And humans, whose quiet courage had inspired the galaxy, were invited to help raise and protect them. Edrin watched as officials arrived to carefully transport the dragons back to the sanctuary. Each dragon paused before leaving the barn. Their small eyes lingered on him, remembering the warmth and safety they had found there. One little dragon nuzzled his shoulder, leaving a tiny mark of dust and soft scales. Edrin smiled, brushing it gently away. He understood what they were saying without words. "Thank you, and we will not forget." The dragons trusted him, and he had protected that trust. The officials were amazed by the dragons' behavior. Instead of fear or aggression, the dragons had shown calm intelligence. They had resisted using their power to harm, choosing instead to guard a single human. The sanctuary scientists realized that humans had a rare quality, an ability to care without needing control. And that quality had made a difference. No machines, no soldiers, no weapons had done what Edrin had done. As the dragons were lifted into the air and carried away in specialized transport pods, Edrin felt a mixture of pride and relief. He had not wanted fame. He had not wanted recognition. He had only wanted to do what was right. And in doing so, he had changed the galaxy's understanding of humans. The broadcasts continued, showing children, scholars, and leaders alike that sometimes strength came not from power, but from responsibility, compassion, and courage. Weeks passed, and life on Edrin's farm returned to its quiet rhythm. The fields were tended, the animals cared for, and the barn repaired after the dragon's stay. Yet, even in normal routines, something had changed. The galaxy knew about this small moon, this quiet farmer, and the dragons that had trusted him. But Edrin did not change. He did not seek recognition. He did not accept offers for positions in the sanctuary or special honors. He continued to plant seeds, feed animals, and care for his farm. His courage had been quiet, and he wanted it to remain that way. The dragons did not forget him. Often, when the sanctuary was calm and the young dragons needed a break from the structured environment, they returned to his barn. They would rest among the hay, curl up in warm patches of light, and sometimes nuzzle Edrin's hands. He welcomed them quietly, giving them the safety they had come to trust. Their visits became a natural part of his life, a gentle reminder of the bond they had formed and the lessons the galaxy had learned through him. Across the galaxy, conversations began to shift. Leaders and scholars debated human value in a new light. Previously, humans had been underestimated. Their fleets were small, their technology basic, and their species considered fragile. Yet now, even the smallest humans could inspire loyalty, trust, and protection from creatures thought impossible to control. They did not rule through force. They did not dominate with power. They ruled, instead, by standing firm for what was right, by caring for the weak, and by facing challenges alone if necessary. Edrin himself remained humble. He did not boast about the dragon's return or about the attention his farm had received. He smiled quietly when children sent messages of thanks, when scientists spoke about the lessons humans could teach, or when the media replayed the standoff. For him, the important thing was simple: the dragons were safe and he had kept his promise to them. That was enough. Everything else, the fame, the accolades, the admiration, was unnecessary. At night, the barn glowed softly again, not from alarms or technology, but from the warmth of dragons resting inside. Edrin sat nearby, sometimes reading quietly, sometimes just watching. Each visit from the dragons reminded him that care and trust were powerful tools. They had survived not because of their strength, but because someone had been willing to stand up for them, to protect them, and to show that responsibility and compassion mattered more than control or fear. The galaxy never forgot that moment. Across countless star systems, species retold the story of a single human who had protected dragons without a fleet, without weapons, without soldiers, only with courage, patience, and care. Children learned it as a lesson in empathy. Leaders used it to guide decisions. Scholars wrote about it in books and archives. And everywhere, humans were seen differently, not as weak or insignificant, but as capable of quiet heroism that could change worlds. And on the small moon, on a quiet farm, Edrin Hale continued his simple life. The dragons visited often, curling among hay and warmth when they needed peace. They stayed not because of rules or commands but because they trusted him. Edrin smiled softly as he watched them, knowing that the galaxy had learned something important. Power was not always in weapons or fire. True strength was in care, in compassion, and in the courage to stand alone when the world expected you to fail. And so life continued, quiet and gentle, yet full of meaning. The dragons slept in his barn, the farm thrived, and the galaxy remembered. Humans did not rule with fear. Humans did not rule with weapons. Humans ruled through quiet responsibility, loyalty, and courage. And in the heart of one humble farmer, The galaxy had seen the best of what humanity could be. Edrin looked up at the stars that night, the dragons curled nearby, and whispered softly to himself, "We do not need to be the strongest to make a difference. We only need to care enough to stand." The dragons twitched their small tails in response as if agreeing. And somewhere, across billions of star systems, the galaxy understood.